أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
ربنا علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وصلي اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد. So that's what we're going to do today, inshallah. What is our methodology? Everybody who's been here by now knows by heart. Our methodology starts with studying the Arabic Quran, cross-referencing within the Quran, depending on the Quran and its Arabic tongue. We do go, of course, to the oldest lexicons because we don't know the Arabic. So we rely on our predecessors who brought us this knowledge, and we go to the oldest lexicons, amongst which are the lexicon of Ibn Faris, who died in 1004 of the Common Era, which is 395 of Hijri. And after him came Al-Raghib al-Asfahani, who died in 502 of Hijri, 1108. So it's like 100 years later of Ibn Faris. And then we have Ibn Mandur, who is mostly used. Most people who explain Quran, talk about Quran, give you the meanings of words, they use Ibn Mandur, Lisan al-Arab. And Ibn Mandur died in 1311 or 711 Hijri, which is the big difference from the first lexicographer who died in 395 Hijri to 711 Hijri. That's much later. So as you look at the lexicons, if you have those lexicons, hard copies in your library, you will notice that to look up one word in the first lexicon, you'll get 3 lines. To look up the same word in the next lexicon, which is 100 years later, you will get, or more than 100 years later, you will get half a page. To look them up again, those words, in the third lexicon I just mentioned, you will get a page, maybe more. What does that tell you? That in time, there was more elaboration on the meaning. Actually, what? Al-balaghatu al-ijaz. Not al-balaghatu fil-ijaz. Eloquence is in brevity, is in being brief. Eloquence is in being brief. You say what you need to say with the least words. That means that you are eloquent. Al-balaghatu al-ijaz. That's the way it is said, not even fil-ijaz. Is brevity. So eloquence is brevity. Al-balaghatu al-ijaz. So that's the way. That's why I go to the oldest lexicon of Ibn Faris, who died in 395 Hijri. So that's what we do first and foremost, and then we do gain insight from authenticated prophetic tradition, of course, from the Hadith, which is Sahih al-Isnad. We do gain insight from that, as well as all the knowledge that we can find left to us from our brethren who preceded us in faith. We gain insight from that, but we don't rely on that. We rely on the Quran, context, and language. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, in Surah Muhammad, Surah 47, Ayah 24, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Will they not then يَتَدَبَّرُونَ the Quran? Now, what is the meaning of يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآن? What's the meaning of tadabbur? If you know Arabic, you'll go back to the root verb dabara. That's the only way, dabara. And you will realize that if you want to say it in English, you would say, you'd give a whole line to explain that one word, tadabbur. Now, this line, which I'm going to give you, is the whole line explaining the word tadabbur. Will they not then, as the ayah says, afala, will they not then, means afala, yatadabbarun, will they not then pursue to the conclusion, just behind it, to grasp the full implication of the Quran. Do they not pursue the Quran to the conclusion or to the gist behind it to grasp its full implication? So every word in the Quran, you have to do the tadabbur of it, meaning to pursue that word to grasp its full implication. How do we do that? From the lexicon and from the context of the Quran. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا, or are there upon certain hearts and minds their own locks? Not أقفال, أقفالها, meaning you have created your own lock over your heart and mind, and that's the lock that is clamping it shut. So this is what dubur and yatadabbaruna is about. And in another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Quran, will they not then pursue the Quran to the conclusion behind it, or to the gist behind it, to grasp its full implication? أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا. Had it been from any other than God, they would have found in it much discrepancy. Right? We just mentioned information sources. What happens when you have many information sources? Confusion, right? Confusion. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here, yes, it's one source. That's why it is what? There's no discrepancy in it. So the methodology that we're using, the Iqra principle, is the only way to understanding the Arabic Quran, so it delivers to us coherent clarification. Coherent clarification. Bayan. Bayan. Now, unlike any other compilation on earth, Quran is not a compiled book, compiled words, compiled letters, compiled recordings, narrations. It's not that. It is not a qira'ah. When you read something, you say you read a qira'ah. Qara'a qira'atan. This is the only entity on earth that Allah has named Quran. There is nothing else on earth with the name Quran. Anything else compiled is a kitab. Kitab is a compilation, could be in any form, digital form, written form. A katiba is a gathering of soldiers or of people together. So, kitab is something compiled. It doesn't have to do with anything written or anything similar to Quran. But Quran itself is what? It is a kitabullah. It is the compilation of God, but it has been named and designated Quran. Remember what we said about the importance of names? It's so important to know the meaning of names. The first thing we should know is the meaning of names. What does the Quran mean? Why is it called Quran? Why is it not called just Kitabullah? Why is it not called Qira'ah? Why is it not? Why Quran? So the Quran is it's wahi, which is communicated information given to the messenger, peace upon him, in an active state. In an active state. It was collected, retained, assimilated. In an active state, it is emergent, it is superlative, it is interactive with its qari. Why? How do we know that? How do we know that? Because of its the grammatical form of the word Quran. When was the Quran named Quran? Was the Quran named Quran from the beginning? In the third surah revealed to the Prophet, peace upon him, it took the third surah revealed to the Prophet, peace upon him, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him the name of this revelation. In Surah Al-Muzammil, at the end of Surah Al-Muzammil, he was given the name of this revelation. You know, Surah Al-Muzammil starts, يا أيها المزمل قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو انقص منه قليلا أو زد عليه ورتل القرآن ترتيلا إن سنلقي عليك قولا ثقيلا. قولا, it was not yet called Quran. قولا, called what? Speech or something, information we give you. It was not called Quran. So we have the beginning of Surah Al-Muzammil, which is the surah about him being burdened, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling him in order to relieve himself of his burden to what? To do qiyam al-layl, to stay up at night, half the night, or a little bit less, or a little bit more. What did he do? Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He stayed up 2/3 of the night. 2/3 of every night, he would stay up reciting the Quran and praying. It was a command. قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. All of it, نصفه أو انقص منه قليلا. So he would stay up 2/3 of the night. The last part of Surah Al-Muzammil came a year later. And I read also in the tafasir, someone said 10 years later. But most of those who said when the last part was revealed, they said it was revealed a year later, giving him respite regarding the lengthy all night or half night qiyam. And he had been doing 2/3 of it. And what was he told? إن ربك يعلم أنك تقوم أدنى من ثلثي الليل أو ونصفه وثلثه. Allah knows what you were doing. وطائفة من الذين معك, and some of those who were with you. So he was not alone in his qiyam. And then he says, علم أن لن تحصوه فتاب عليكم فاقرأوا ما تيسر من القرآن. It was the first time that the word Quran was mentioned in that surah. So it was the first time that the revelation introduced itself as the Quran, proving now, what does it do? It proved linguistically to those who were listening with the messenger at that time, to him and everybody who knew Arabic perfectly at that time, okay, that the Quran is active. It is superlative, it is active, it is in the now, it is interactive with you, O qari. Because the Quran is Quran with a qari. Without a qari, it remains kitab. Kitabullah, revered, loved, put on the shelf. Once you open it, once you look through it, once you start trying to understand, it is Quran because you are qari. Once you are there, it is Quran to you. So in the Arabic, in the grammar, it is said about this fa'lan, any noun in accordance with fa'lan, the verb becoming like the fa'l, becoming fa'lan as a noun, like qara'a, Quran, anasa, insan, rahama, rahman. Okay, so those three nouns have followed the grammatical form fa'lan. What does he say about this? صيغة فعلان في اللغة تدل على وصف فعلي فيه معنى المبالغة للصفات الطارئة. It is about expressing something which is being at the moment that you're calling it that by that فعلان structure. It is مبالغ فيه, meaning it is superlative, supreme, and طارئ, emergent. It's emergent at that moment, in the now, happening right now as you speak. And the examples given were like Atish and Atshan. Atish is thirsty. Atshan is thirsty to the extremes of thirsty in the now. Same thing with Ja'i' and Jawan. Ja'i' is somebody who's hungry. You could say that these people are hungry, meaning they're poor, they're always hungry, whatever. But if your child comes to you and nags right now, and I need to eat right now, he says, Ana Jawan, doesn't say Ana Ja'i', because it's at the extreme and happening right now as we speak. So that's the difference between any noun that has the meaning or the grammatical structure of fa'lan. It is active in the now and superlative. Its verb is superlative. Its verb is superlative. So all of this is related to the first command, Iqra, which is our timeless dynamic. It has 6 components in the lexicon: to gather, to carry, to deliberate, to witness, to time, and to share. To gather, to carry, to deliberate, to witness, to time in the now, and to share. These are the 6 components of Iqra. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Iqra, bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqa al-insana min alaq. اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. Okay. Question. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق, is it a command or not? It is. Did you ever hear of the Prophet saying, باسم ربي الذي خلق? Have you ever heard him say, باسم ربي الذي خلق? But it's a command. It's right there. His first command. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. He never said, باسم ربي الذي خلق. He never ever said it. So what response can we have for that question? Did he or did he not obey? Only one response. Of course he did, right? Of course he did. Okay. How did he obey if he did not say بسم ربي الذي خلق? He said بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم because الرحمن is الرب الذي خلق. And you will find that out when you read the Quran. Always look at الرحمن where it appears in the Quran. It is about al-khalq. Always. قالوا اتخذ الرحمن ولدا. How could الرحمن have a child? Surah Al-Rahman. Al-Rahman, Surah Al-Rahman. Does it talk about Rahma itself or does it talk about the Rahma in creation? About creation. Surah Al-Rahman is all about creation. Talking about the shrubs and the trees and the all about creation. النجم والشجر والشمس, it's all about creation. So what does that mean? It means that Ar-Rahman huwa Ar-Rabb alladhi khalaq, and the Prophet, peace upon him, immediately started saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim whenever he قرأ. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. عندما قرأ. When we recite the Quran, we say Bismillah ar-Rahman. Always, always. Actually, not only when we recite the Quran, when we do anything, we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim when we do anything. So of course he obeyed, and we are obeying when we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That is an answer to اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. But we have to do Iqra as well. باسم ربنا الذي خلق. So we have to look at khaliqa, at the creation, everything in creation, and do the Iqra. خلق الإنسان من علق. Okay, so what is alaq? When there was no knowledge of what science had, and there were no scientific discoveries, alaq was considered a blood clot. You still find in the tafasir today people saying or writing or repeating that God created man from a blood clot or from a clot. When people started looking at the embryo with a microscope, they found that it looked like a leech. It looks exactly like a leech. They said that is the alaq that it was created from, the insan. And then when they looked through laparoscopy in a woman's belly, they found that the child was hanging by the umbilical cord. And they said, oh, that is the alaq, because it is what? It is hanging. And we know that hanging, we know in Arabic, hangers are alla'at, right? And my grandmother used to call the thuraya, what we call thuraya, the chandeliers, they used to call them alla'a, allaqa. Why? Because they used to bring it down. It's hanging. They bring it down, light those the lights with matches. I don't know how they used to do it. Allahu a'lam. So it was called allaqa. So خلق الإنسان من علق is what that is, how that was understood before. What? Before now. Alaq. Later on, some people said خلق الإنسان من علق is about being created from the insan, from alaqat. Alaqat. Because you are an insan because of all the relationships that come into your being an insan. So you are insan from alaq, meaning alaqat. However, when you notice the difference between words, when you do tadabbur and you note the difference, you do Iqra, right? And you know the difference between words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not talking about bashar here. He's talking about insan. We know that our bashari part is created from teen, right? So that bashari part, if you said from alaq and you brought the image of a leech, you said from alaq and you brought the image of a child hanging by the umbilical cord or hanging in the mother's womb, you would say, okay, that's alaq. But that's not the insan. That's the bashar. We are talking about insan here. Insan is not, it's the bashar. Insan is the bashar plus what? Plus نفخة الروح. نفخ فيه من روحه. Then he became insan. Before he was bashar. What's the bashar? Bashar is a creature يبشر with something that's coming later. Bashar is something that has bishar in it, bishara of something coming later, which is grander. The grander was the insan when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala نفخ فيه من روحه and he had the cognizance. So when Allah says خلق الإنسان من علق, we're not talking about bashar here. We're talking about something else. What are we talking about? We go to the lexicon, we look up the meaning of علق. علق يرجع إلى معنى واحد وهو أن يناط الشيء بالشيء العالي. It goes back to one single meaning, which is something hanging to something higher, something high. And يناط الشيء بالشيء العالي. Actually, يناط does not just mean to hang. It means to be attached, linked to something high. So, رب العالمين, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق, خلق الإنسان من علق. He created الإنسان who had the cognizance from نفخة الروح. That's the إنسان. And that is our attachment to the أعلى, not just to the عالي. Our attachment to the أعلى. ربنا is الأعلى, right? So that's our attachment to him is through what? Through this نفخة الروح. And that is خلق الإنسان من علق. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. خلق everybody. خلق everything. خلق everything, which includes the إنسان. But then he says خلق الإنسان من علق. So it's not about DNA. It's not about our bashari existence as mammals, because there are many like us. It's about our insan existence as insan, because there's nobody at all like us. We are insan. We are min alaq. Nobody else is. The ayah is quite clear that nobody else is al-insan min alaq. So it's really very heartwarming to realize that you are insan and you are not created like everybody else. Although you're earth to earth, dust to dust, your physical body goes there like everybody else, or everything on earth. However, you as insan, your nafs, which is the nafs of insan, يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك, right? راضية مرضية. The nafs goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because that's where its home is, right? And we are insan and we are bashar. We are both. And how do you know that something and another are different in the Quran? No synonyms at all. You know it from looking at an ayah which might have both words. So Sitna Maryam, what was she told? فَإِمَّا تَرَيِنَّ مِنَ الْبَشَرِ أَحَدًا فَقُولِي what? إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. So when she sees the physical body. That's a bashar. When she speaks, she cannot speak to bashar. Bashar is never spoken to in the Quran. Who is spoken to? Al-insan. Ya ayyuha al-insan. Ya ayyuha al-nas. Never ya ayyuha al-bashar. Because our bodily structure doesn't deserve to be spoken to. Whereas our cognizance deserves to be spoken to. Ya ayyuha al-insan. So again, we go back to Quran, Rahman, Quran, Insan. All of that is in the now, in Al-An, superior, occurring now. And the Insan is the one who is superior in what? Superior in the familial traits. the familial traits as a family, generating uns, which is comfort and companionship. That's why we're called insan, because we generate uns. That's why we're called insan. We generate the uns. And that insan should be doing what? Gathering, carrying, deliberating, witnessing in a timely manner, serving and sharing the most superior message which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to us, which is in the an, it is relevant, it is alive every moment. So for us, we know that the Quran, the language of it, is its phenomenon, its sign, or what some people call miracle. The marvel is the language of the Quran. The language of the Quran. So the language of the Quran was to the contemporaries of Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. It was what the staff, al-asa, the 9 signs, and the Exodus, and the parting of the ocean was to Prophet Moses and his contemporaries. All of that, those amazing miracles that Prophet Moses had, peace upon him, are equal in effect to the Quran's language, the effect of the Quran's language during the Prophet's time, peace upon him. So we're just showing how marvelous the Quran's language is. It's equal also to being born of a virgin, healing the leprosy, the blindness, and raising the dead, which Prophet Jesus, peace upon him, did to his contemporaries. So look at the contemporaries of both messengers and the contemporaries of Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. Prophet Muhammad just brought the Quran. That was his marvel, his miracle, his message, that what made them bow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the Quran. That was the miracle. And this is our dynamic which we should be pursuing. So in brief, I'm just going to count the 6 denotations of qaraya. qaraya أصل صحيح يدل على جمع واجتماع ومنه القرية. qaraya is about gathering, and from that comes the word qarya, which means in Arabic a village. Okay, that's number 1. The second is يقال ما قرأت هذه الناقة سلا، يراد أنها ما حملت قط. ما قرأت يعني ما حملت. So the first is to gather, the second is to carry. A she-camel who has never borne offspring is said to have never قرأت. The third is to deliberate, القصد. يقال قريت وقروت إذا سلكت. If I know where I'm going, I'm deliberating what I'm going to do. I'm thinking about it and deliberating and having purpose, aiming and proceeding. You would say qaraytu or qarawtu, meaning I proceeded in a certain direction. It is about aiming and proceeding. And actually, there is a reading of Surah 31, Ayah 19 of Surah Luqman. When he said, waqsid fi mashyik, there is also the reading of aqsid, meaning anqasad, meaning deliberate. When you are walking, be deliberate, know where you are going. The fourth is to be present and informed, to witness. القارئة هو الشاهد وجمعها القواري وهم الشهود. Witnessing. The fifth is about time and timeliness, being aware of the now. قرأ means time or period. هبت الرياح لقارئها. The winds are blowing at their time, meaning they are blowing in season. The sixth and the final denotation of qaraya is to be hospitable, to serve and share the best of what you have been gathering, carrying, deliberating, and witnessing in a timely manner. By serving and sharing with others, you complete the activation of the Iqra dynamic. Qira is hospitality. It's what you offer to your guests. Subhanallah, right? What you offer to your guests. It's called qira. And all of that comes from the root verb qaraya and is related to the what? First command of the last message to humanity, which is Iqra. So we're going to talk about gathering now. Gathering, you can, easily understand and think about it as being what? making choices. What are you gathering? You're gathering in life. What are you gathering? You're gathering what you're doing, what you're taking hold of, what you consider valuable. You're making choices. So there's a sense of self in what you gather versus imitation in what you gather. There's selection in what you gather versus seduction in what you gather. There's awareness in what you gather versus just mere possession. There's wholesomeness, طيبات, in what you gather versus what? خبائث. Okay? There's amendment in what you gather, islah, to amend, versus remaining guilty because you have not amended. You have left without making amends. So there's a lot that we can talk about gather. I don't know how much, I don't think we have enough time to go through everything, but we'll just try and fly through. So as I said, the most important thing is the importance of al-asma. علم آدم الأسماء كلها. When he had cognizance, the first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him were al-asma, which is why, as I mentioned before, our children should have the right asma. They should know what shukr means. They should know what iqab means, which is not punishment, but it's consequence. And all those beautiful words, kids should know what it means. For us, let's just discuss very briefly the meaning of taqwa, which many translate as fear or piety or obedience or to shield you from God's, astaghfirullah al-azim, anger. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no anger. The word ghadab does not mean anger. The word ghayz means anger. Ghayz is a reaction. Ghadab is not a reaction. Ghadab means severity. He is severe. That's it. He is severe. When somebody does something, he is severe against them. غضب عليهم. Doesn't mean he's angry. Astaghfirullah al-azim. We should never use that word when we're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because anger is a reaction. Ghayz is a reaction. So, okay, see how I deviate and then we don't finish on time. So we're talking about taqwa. So that's the explanation of taqwa, fear, piety, obedience, and the shield from God's anger. That's what some people say. But the thing is that our predecessors, as-Sahaba, they knew the meaning of taqwa because they knew Quran. They were there listening to the message being revealed in their midst. So they knew the meaning of taqwa. When they talk amongst themselves, the way, let's say, we are talking amongst ourselves, and you're trying to also what? Find different facets to something you already know. So about taqwa, everything you have heard about taqwa is the facet of that person telling you a facet of something they already knew, and they're not mentioning what they already know because they know it. It's Quran. So they're not mentioning the Quran, but they're just giving you a facet of how you can also take a look at taqwa from that angle. So Umar ibn al-Khattab and Ubay ibn Ka'b radiallahu anhuma. Umar ibn al-Khattab سأل Ubay ibn Ka'b. You think Umar ibn al-Khattab does not know the meaning of taqwa? Of course he knows. But he's just elaborating. سأل Ubay ibn Ka'b عن التقوى. It doesn't say what he asked exactly or how he asked it. It just says سأله عن التقوى. عن, about it. And so Ubay ibn Ka'b said, أما سلكت طريقا ذا شوك? Have you not walked over a path, a thorny path? قال بلى. قال فما عملت? What did you do? قال شمرت واجتهدت. I pulled up my clothes and I made, اجتهدت. I put effort, جهد, into not stepping on the thorns. He says, oh, that is taqwa. And that's true. That's very true. If you know the Quranic meaning of taqwa. But when you don't know the Quranic meaning of taqwa, you take this and you consider this the definition of taqwa. And you lose the precision of the Quran. What is the definition of taqwa? Where do we get the definition of taqwa from? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, قوله الحق. قوله الحق. What he says is truth and justice. So when we use the comments rather than the actual data it's based on, we lose our definitions. Taqwa is, I'll look at it linguistically. وقى يقي وأصلها الوقية، دفع الشيء عن شيء بغيره، ووقيته أقيه وقيا، والوقاية ما يقي الشيء. Thrusting something away from something with another. You are thrusting something away تقي with another. دفع الشيء عن شيء بغيره. So that's the linguistic meaning of taqwa. And there's also the saying, الوقاية خير من العلاج. Prevention is better than cure. So what did you understand here? What did you understand? You understood quite a bit, but not the definition yet. Where is the definition? The definition is in two places in the Quran, Surah Al-Mujadala 58:9, Surah Al-Ma'idah 5:2. وإذا حللتم فاصطادوا ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم أن صدوكم عن المسجد الحرام أن تعتدوا وتعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. Bir and ithm are opposites. Taqwa and udwan are opposites. So تعرف الأشياء بأضدادها. You have that saying in Arabic. You get to know something by knowing what? The opposite of it. So if udwan is the opposite of taqwa, we are much closer to knowing what taqwa is. In another ayah, Mujadala 58:9, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تناجيتم فلا تتناجوا بالإثم والعدوان ومعصية الرسول وتناجوا بالبر والتقوى. Again, the same thing. واتقوا الله الذي إليه تحشرون. Again, the same thing. It's the opposite of what? Of عدوان. So if عدوان is to be what? Aggressive, which is aggression. Taqwa is to beware of the aggression, which is why taqwa is awareness, but I like to add the word in between brackets, bewareness. And tattaqi shay, you beware that thing. You are aware of it and you beware it as well. So when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say we are an nattaqillah, to be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's very close to the word that is mostly used, which is conscious. But it's slightly different, and I like to make sure that we use the word aware because it's different. Awareness and aggression. These are opposites. Because you'd think awareness is the opposite of unawareness. No, it's not. It's the opposite of aggression, actually. So we have examples of that in the Quran. Everything has to be proven through the Quran. We have examples of that in the Quran, in the story of Ibn Adam. Ibn Adam, you have the story of Ibn Adam. One of them was the aggressor. The other one was the aware. إنما يتقبل الله من المتقين. Al-Muttaqi is the one who did not raise his hand to defend himself and was killed. So you know now that taqwa is the opposite of aggression, because that story gives you both and shows you clearly the meaning of taqwa and aggression. So thrusting away udwan is taqwa. Thrusting away udwan is taqwa. So you thrust away, you have taqwa, meaning you do the right thing at that moment to thrust away udwan. There's taqwa in everything you do. And everything must be explained within a general Quranic context. Everything. So that's one example about what? That we have to adhere to Quranic context and language. The other one, to understand Quran, you have to do that. The other example is surprising to many, which is about the story of whom? Of Prophet Ayub. Prophet Ayub. Prophet Ayub's story is amazing. Why? Because we have actually two stories. We have the Quranic story and we have the narratives that we hear that are not Quranic. So before we do that, However, I'm just going to tell you what how it was explained. Okay. Ibn Kathir explained the story of Ayub. That Ayub and he was a man who was quick, astaghfirullah al-azim, astaghfirullah al-azim. He was a man who was quick to get angry. And so when he vowed to beat his wife 100 lashes, God told him, take 100 sticks or 100 reeds, like grasses, and beat your wife once with it, and that would suffice as 100 lashes. Okay? And he says, Ibn Kathir, this was a way out and a solution for those who fear God and obey him. This solution was found especially for this patient, long-suffering, loyal, honest, and kind-hearted wife. Okay? Subhanallah. باعت ضفيرتها بخبز فأطعمته إياه فلامها على ذلك. Now look at all those stories. Where do you think they're coming from? They're coming from the Old Testament. As Ibn Kathir says, God indicates in this verse that an attitude originating from a moment of anger and the consequent regret does not harm him as being a patient man, meaning that although he was supposed to be a patient man, in a moment of anger and the following regret, that's okay. It does not demean from his fantastic patience. Well, actually, it does. Astaghfirullah al-azim. If it was true, it does. It does. And it's enough for us to know how many men on earth, since they read this tafsir, have been saying, if Ayyub ma sabar, how can I have sabr? And they add, subhanAllah, they add, the loyal wife of Ayyub probably felt proud because of the special application God gave. I don't think she felt proud. I don't think that happened. Anyway, it didn't happen. It never happened. So in the Bible, the book of Job 2:9-10, I'm reading from the Bible. Then said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thy integrity? Curse God and die. Now his wife is saying to him, curse God and die. But he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. So even the Bible did not mention him beating her. Where did the beating come from? Even in the Bible, it's not about beating. It's somebody elaborating, putting milh filful, as we say, salt and pepper, amongst what about the story. The biblical story, this one was hinted at in the Bible that he was angry at her. And the elaborations in our books came to say that he beat her. But the Bible does not say that he beat her. The Old Testament does not say that he beat her. But there's a hint that he was what? Angry with her. And here it is. The rabbis who justified beating see it as part of the overall duties of a husband to chastise his wife for educational purposes. So this is a quote I have here, and there's, and it's rabbinical. It's a rabbinical quote from the rabbis that it's permissible to beat your wife for educational purpose. Actually, it's your duty. So we Muslims took that, which is not even in the Bible, it's in the rabbinical books, and went with it, put it in our books, and now our men think that it's okay. What does the Quran say about that? And remember our worshipper Ayub, when he called unto his Lord, that the shaitan has touched me with exhaustion and suffering. The answer was, prod forward with your foot. This is a cool, calm bath and a drink. And we granted him his family and their like as a mercy and reminder to those of understanding and insight, ulul albab. Now, and take a medley by your hand, then idrib bihi, then strike with it, and do not falter. We have indeed found him to be forbearing. How excellent a worshipper he is indeed oft returning. That's it. That's it. There's no mention of his wife, no mention of a beating, no mention of his anger, No mention of anything. But there is mention of taking a medley of grasses to strike something with in the bath. What do you strike with and you do not falter and you are, what do you strike with? It's a bath. So subhanAllah, we know from other stories that he had a disease and that this bath was to cleanse him of the disease, and the grasses were the herbs to use to cleanse him of the disease that he should rub himself with and not to falter. So subhanAllah, how can we still say what we say about Prophet Ayub? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, نعم العبد إنه أواب وإن وجدناه صابرا. We have indeed found him sabiran. How can he be sabir if he had that anger? There's no way. He was sabir with what happened until then, and with going into that bath, and with the pain he felt, cleansing himself with that medley of grass. So we have to go back to the lexicons, go back to our language, and understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us. And we are al-insan, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in the best of taqweem. We are the best and created from alaq. And hopefully that this will be now giving you like a paradigm shift, that you look harder into the names, into al-asma, and we gather what is best. It's life-changing, okay? On what has my gathering focus been? I'm gathering, but what has my focus been as I'm gathering? Much of what we gather is a burden. It's not good. So are we gathering bitterness, self-blame, grudges, popularity? Are we gathering likes? Are we gathering influence, power, wealth, knowledge, good deeds, rewards that will be kept in store for us for the future? Are we gathering the good deeds? Because as we know, when we do a good deed, what the reward is in store for us. Is that what we're gathering, inshallah? We should recognize our own worth as insan. God deemed us worthy to receive the Quran. He spoke to each of us, Ya ayyuhal insan. Let us release the burdens and wrongdoings we've gathered or imposed upon others. And let us start doing Iqra, inshallah. As we gather, we make the best of choices, inshallah, working with all that God has put at our disposal. And with that, we conclude our talk today, inshallah, and listen to Khawatim Surah Al-Baqarah.
آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين